Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Carlton People. Today we are going to meet Paul. I'm going to meet Paul, and you're going to meet him. Hello, Paul.
Terry, good to be with you. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. I've seen a bit of the backstory in what you've seen in terms of what you wrote to me, and you've got plenty of memories to share today.
Absolutely. I'm probably not the demographic that you would normally have on this podcast, Terry, I must admit, but I thought there's a bit of ancient history that people might be interested in.
Indeed, I think we can learn a bit from the history, no doubt about that. Maybe we start from the beginning of you. What's your Carlton story, and how did you come to be a supporter?
I think, like many people, it was tribal, Terry. My father lived in Berkeley Street in Brunswick. And of course, in those days, wherever the suburb was where you allocated your allegiance to a football team. So he was Carlton right from the very start. And so that played into the family. But my father was Carlton and my mother was Melbourne. So I think the prenup at the time was that the girls would be Melbourne and the boys would be Carlton. And so the line was divided down there. Back in those days, of course, you're talking early 60s, etc. Melbourne was very successful and Carlton wasn't. But we'd still go along to the old Princess Park, where back in the day, you'd fit 40,000 people in the complex. And very little seating, obviously, a couple of stands, but the rest of it was all standing room. And I can remember, and you think about this now, Terry, I would have been no more than 10, and we'd be going to these games that were absolutely packed, shoulder to shoulder people. We'd walk in there, we'd get our ticket clipped, and we'd go up and Dad would say, "See you after the game." And as an 8-year-old, I would weave my way through the crowd down to the fence, stand there, watch the game. At the end of the game, I'd run out and on the ground and pat a few guys on the back. Come up, my father would be standing in front of the press box. I'd know he was there. He was standing there with his brothers. I'd jump the fence and go back, and then we'd go home. And to think that a young kid in that sort of, and I was doing that at Collingwood. I was doing that at all the suburban grounds. There was no problem. People that just let you through. And I had some great heroes back there in the 60s into the 70s.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few people who recently actually who were going to the games in the 70s, and they talk a lot about you mentioned the word tribal. That seems to be the common theme. What was it like going to the games back then compared to now in terms of the passion and the electricity in the crowd?
Well, I think because you had such a compact crowd, the people were, as I said, in shoulder to shoulder. You're getting these enormous and sellout crowds at Princess Park, at Vic Park, at Windy Hill, etc. And it was passionate. It was probably, in a sense, more passionate than what you get now, because the intensity was there because of the crowds were there at these suburban grounds. Today, obviously, at the G and at Marvel, you're spread out to a certain degree because you're all sitting. There's still great atmosphere, but I think back then, and it was, Carlton were taking on Collingwood. The suburb of Carlton is taking on the suburb of Collingwood, and they're so close together that there's got to be some sort of a tribal animosity between the two. They were great days. You'd see the occasional blue in the crowd. There'd be no problem about that. But you'd also see the peanut man going around. You'd see the blanket going around where you chuck your donations in for the cheer squad, all those great things. And you had access to the players after the game. You'd run out on the ground and you'd, as I say, pat them on the back as they're going off. You'd have the trooper horse running behind you, all that good fun.
Yeah, wow. I never really knew what it was like to be a part of the suburban side of the AFL. I mean, I was born in 91, so I don't really remember much. I mean, my early memories are at Optus Oval or at Princess Park, but I didn't truly get to feel what it was like to, represent your suburb and go and watch the Carlton Football Club at our local ground.
That's what I really love these days. And I don't think the opportunity is going to come up that much moving forward because they're cutting out the practice matches. But even the last couple of years, those practice matches that we've had at Optus Oval, where you pack the place out, it's only a practice match. Gosh, it's only the first one. But there's an atmosphere about it. And there's something really special about it. And I think it'd be great if, and I know they go into the country these days and they promote in the country, but to be able to at least keep something like that at Optus Oval and some of the other suburban grounds during the practice games, you just get that feel back again.
Yeah, right. You, I would say, are part of the golden generation of Carlton supporter. You've seen some, multiple premierships. How do you reconcile seeing so many of them, and which are more special than the others?
I remember I was at a Carlton function a couple of years ago, and I was speaking there about Carlton and what it means, etc. And I said, listen, Carlton owes me nothing. I've seen 8 premierships in a time
Wow.
where you're most impressionable, I suppose, during those ages. My wish is for my kids, who I've sort of cajoled into barracking for Carlton. Well, it's Carlton or don't eat, basically one of the two. And so it's now for them that I want them to see some sort of success. And it's brilliant that, towards the end of the year there, we saw what the potential is to be able to do it. But from my point of view, listen, as I said, they owe me nothing. I've lived through 68, 70, 72, 79, 81, 82, 87, 95. I've seen them all. 72 was special because I was in the crowd, and towards the end of that particular game, that's the one where we kicked the big score against Richmond. And I'd noticed for a number of years that when the game finished, the police came out and they circled around everywhere but the MCC members. And I was just in a section just next to the members. I was only 16, 17 at the time. So what I did towards the end of the game, I ducked out, went around, got through into the members. And then when the game finished, I jumped the fence in the members because there was no police action there, and did the lap of honour with Nick and with Wolsey, with Brucey, the whole lot of them. I was on the ground, and actually you look back at I look back at the video, and I can see myself running around like an idiot there with the team with the Premiership Cup. Now they take so long to go around with the Premiership Cup these days, but there's so many people on the ground, but supporters aren't there. So that's the one I remember because I was able to jump the fence. But 70, coming back half time, we were gone for all money. And then Barras made the changes, and the rest is history. 95 was great because it was basically over by half time, and you could actually sit and relax and enjoy the game itself. 87, there was a bit of revenge there because, of course, Hawthorn beat us the year before. And then 79, 81, gosh, anytime you beat Collingwood, well, it's a good game, isn't it? And against Richmond in 82. So, no, as I said, they owe me nothing, but I want it for the people coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it like? I mean, what's your game day experience like these days? Do you go to most games? Do you watch from home?
I've tried in the last couple of years to at least get to one interstate game. I reckon that's just a great thing to do. I went to the Gather Round last year, unfortunately. But the whole experience of the Gather Round, I think, is fantastic. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, just as long as the AFL understand that it should be Adelaide playing Port Adelaide on Gather Round and not Adelaide and Port playing other teams and giving them a home ground advantage. But that's a whole different argument. I'm an MCC member, which means that I go to the MCC, obviously when Carlton are playing there, and I'm a Carlton member for Marvel games as well. So yes, I try to get us to as many games as possible, and get there and barrack pretty loudly, and just have enjoyed the evolution of the last couple of years of seeing what they can do. Not quite trusting sometimes. You see a bit, but you're not quite sure. I think now, towards the end of 2023, the trust has built, and I think that moving forward now, that we can look forward and hope that there's some greener pastures ahead. Great effort in the finals this year. I don't think anyone should walk away disappointed, but there's bigger fish to fry. We've got a prelim final to make next year, and then you make the last four, and anything can happen.
Absolutely. Well, we're currently living through a changing of the way in which footy's consumed. I mean, we're sitting here recording a video interview, and I think it's probably a when you zoom out, you look at the change in which football is consumed by the supporter. You spent some time outside of Australia. You were a Blue abroad for a while. What was it like staying in touch with the club back then?
Well, really, the only way to stay in touch with the club was through the old shortwave radio and to listen on game days, because you didn't have the chance back then to be able to get on the internet and at least have a look and see what the newspapers are saying about the football. You'd rely on clippings being sent by relatives, which would be 2 weeks old, of course, by the time you got them. But vividly remember back in around about, when was it, about 87, 80, it was 88, 89, living in the Middle East. And before I left, I made sure I got bought a shortwave radio, one that had the digital readout on it, because you could actually then zero right in on the frequency you needed to get, because that was most important. And then on game day, it'd be 5:30 in the morning, go up to the roof of the building we're at, point the aerial in the right direction, hope that Tim Lane was going to come on somewhere along the line, and he'd be there in the distance or the background in between the static, and sit up and listen to the games. And also people would send videos across, again, couple of weeks later than what the game was, but again, that was all you had. So it was totally different times. And then you'd get on the phone, as you'd realize back in the day, you'd go into the phone box and book your call, and it sounds like you were ringing from the moon, and catch up with it. Football news would be the first thing you'd find about. How'd they go? Who played well? What happened? Where are we? Who got this? All those sort of things as well, because you were just starved of it. Now, the guys these days, anyone that lives overseas, in terms of being able to keep communication with home, whether it be on a personal level, contacting family and staying with family, or staying in contact with what your football club is doing, it's just unbelievable what the access you have through internet, what you guys are doing obviously as well, of just keeping the content up. And these days, gee, you'd be hard pressed trying to be homesick, wouldn't you, Terry, away these days, with the sort of communication you had, probably different to what you had when you were away as well, that you really feel like you're part of the action.
Wow. So when you say people would send you clips, explain how that works. Like, you'd get them a few weeks later, like on a video? Like, how does it work?
No, they'd cut out of the paper. So the Herald Sun write-up of the Carlton St Kilda game, they'd cut it out. They'd cut out a few other bits and pieces, put it in an envelope, shoot it across, and you had it that way. That was the only way you were getting your actual physical information of what was happening. And but that was the way it was, and you cherished every time those letters arrived, and you'd sit down there and you'd soak them all up, and you'd go and see other people in the complex who might have some sort of interest in what you were interested in, and say, hey, listen, look at what arrived today. How fantastic is this? And you get a video. It was almost like having a party. You'd get people around and sit down and watch the video of a game that was 3 weeks old.
Yeah, wow. I marvel at that, just because I try and empathize with what it would be like, and it seems that consuming football, if you weren't at the game, back in those times, was a lot of it was part of your imagination. You would have the information that you would read, or whatever the case would be, and then you'd picture in your mind what it would look like.
It's and also too, the broadcast on the shortwave was fine. It was what you had, and you had to put up with it. But it would fade in and out all the time, and invariably it would fade in and out at the worst possible time. But that's what you had, and that's what you lived with, and that was the norm. Now, to go back to something like that now, after the access of the things we have these days, you'd be tearing your hair out.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I remember when I was away, I had the Watch AFL pass, so I would be able to watch the games, and I thought I was missing out because there wasn't enough content. Even though we had 360 in these programs covering us for a few minutes, I still felt like there was a lot missing. So, I feel like in the last 5 years in particular, things have really expanded when it comes to the access that we have to content.
No doubt at all. And I think that with what you guys do, a few of the really good podcasts that are around as well, that you can cut out all the other noise. And if you just want to concentrate on what your team is up to and the thoughts of people about how they're progressing, etc., there's a whole range of different outlets that you can now tap into and listen to, hear an opinion. You don't always agree with the opinion, of course, but hear an opinion, and they're talking about your team, and that's fantastic.
Yeah. So let's go back a bit. What are some other interesting memories for you that you cherish forever, that stick with you?
Always remember at Princes Park, if we won the toss, we'd kick to the Lygon Street end first, because you'd be coming home with the Heatley stand, which you'd be thumping.
Okay.
And I remember a couple of strong memories. I remember in '72, Carlton Essendon, second quarter, Jezza went berserk and kicked 6 goals. Now, we marvelled at Charlie Curnow's 4 goals towards the end of the season there, I think, against Gold Coast. Jesaulenko just had it on a string for about 20 minutes, and he kicked 6 goals in a row. Now, they're back in the days when a guy gets 2, he'd be thumped behind the ear on the way back to the goal square after he's kicking a goal, and be thumped everywhere. It was just an amazing quarter of football. The other one was seeing Carlton kick their 30-30 against Hawthorn when they kicked the record score. Now, you consider that not only 30 goals, but they kicked 30 points as well, and that was quite incredible. Moving in further into the 80s, it was just, you'd sit in the stands, there'd be 4 goals down at half time, and you knew, well, that's okay, because the premiership quarter's coming up. And Carlton played the premiership quarter like no other team ever did. And they would come out after half time. They'd be 4 down, and they'd be 3 up by 3/4 time, because the Mosquito fleet had taken over, Williams had taken over, Kernahan had taken over. They all put it into top gear. And you just had that confidence that that's going to happen, because they just flicked the switch. And Diesel Williams didn't that third Brown, not only unfathomable, but a bit of a disgrace when you see as to why he didn't win it. But his ability to distribute good Cripps these days, and he's fantastic. He just gets in there and he bulls around. But Diesel on both sides, hand and foot, could hit a target from anywhere. For a guy that's slow as treacle, he had a football brain that would be matched by nobody. So I just think that having been able to sit back and say, well, listen, I saw Jesaulenko at his absolute best, saw Diesel Williams at his absolute best, saw a Carlton team that you had absolute faith in that they could get the job done. As I say, they owe me nothing.
Yeah. Where do some of the players that you watch today, where do they rank in terms of some of the grades? I mean, Cripps is probably the one that has the resume to maybe compete, but how do you look at the players of today compared to the players of yesteryear?
I think that Cripps is going to be an interesting one with him, I think, for the next 3 or 4 years, because he could almost, and this is going to be a pretty big statement, he could almost stamp himself as one of the 2 or 3 best leaders that Carlton have ever had. I'd obviously put Nichols up there as just being up there, and I'd obviously Kernahan with his resume as well. But if we can snag a couple of premierships under the leadership of Cripps, and he continues and gets a bit more all-Australian form, etc., up, I think he can very much stamp himself on in that sort of company. I think that, and the opportunity is there. I think in the next 3 or 4 years, we should be really in there with a chance. As we all know, it's our sweet spot, and we should be really looking at that. So he's one that really stands out. Obviously, in terms of excitement, Charlie Curnow has all the attributes. He almost ticks every box. It's just amazing what he can do, and the potential he still has. I think that we get that forward line worked out properly. He could do anything. And the other interesting one is Wiedering, because you got your Peter Deans from the past. You have Michael Sexton from the past, and quiet guys that just got the job done and got it done every week. And I would obviously put Wiedering in that particular class as well. That unassuming. I'm sure he tells it like it is to the other players. He looks like he's got that sort of personality. But Peter Dean was just an unbelievably courageous player. He's the guy that would stand in the gap in front of Plugger Lockett or Ablett and just fill that gap and know he was going to get crunched from behind. And no, they'd line these sort of guys up that were doing that sort of job. So he was great. Michael Sexton was just Mr. Reliable. And that's what Wiedering has turned out to be as well. So if you've got a couple of comparisons, I'd be looking at those three as being potential. And who knows what we're going to be saying about Tom de Koning in 4 or 5 years' time.
Yeah, right. What is the essence of the Carlton Football Club from your perspective, given you've seen so much of it?
I've really liked what I've seen under the Cook, Sayer, Voss regime, because we were very arrogant for a long time. During those 70s and 80s, and you had guys who were extroverts. You had Wayne Johnson. What an extrovert. You had Buckley, Jimmy Buckley, all these sort of guys. And there was sort of a brashness about us. But then it sort of became more and more, almost to the point of, listen, we've taken this too far. And let's be perfectly honest, over the last 20 years, we've got nothing to be brash about. There's nothing to get too excited about. So yet we still had that arrogant approach about things and whatever. And I just really, if you want to put down as to how we survived last year, I have no doubt Brian Cook was the one that was the glue that kept everyone together in time of crisis, where previously we were so arrogant, we'd say, no, we'll get rid of him and we'll get in him. We'll be arrogant and we'll say, well, we'll get Juddy in and that'll fix the problem. We were arrogant in so many different sorts of ways. You've got to have a bit of strut about you, a bit of swagger, but I think now we've got it in the right proportions. And I think teams generally across the board are like that. You look at Collingwood and the way they go about it these days, and you just think back and you've got that mental picture of 2003 with Vossi running out with John O'Brien and Lepper behind and game face on, and this is going to absolute war. And then you fast forward to 2023 and you got Darcy Moore running out with high-fiving and laughing with De Goey behind him and Maynard behind him. It's a whole different way we're approaching things these days. But I think the essence of Carlton is that we are a top 4 club in this town. We could have gone off the rails during the early 2000s, and we were on our ass, mate. We were absolutely, when you hear about the stories of the players were training with old footballs that were out of shape because they couldn't afford proper footballs, things like that. And you go back and talk to people about that time. I think we've learned our lessons, and I think we've come out of it pretty well.
Yeah, it seemed to me that we just took a little longer than maybe most to move into the modern football environment that we now live in.
I think so. I think, and that was because of arrogance, because Carlton can fix it pretty easy.
Right.
Bang, we just do that, and that'll fix it. Do this, and that'll fix it. Well, no, you got to play the long game sometimes, because you get yourself into a situation that you probably shouldn't have got yourself into, but you've got to play the long game. And we weren't prepared to play the long game until I think Bolton and Silvani came in and said, okay, we're going to strip this right back. And don't expect anything for a little while. Again, probably took longer than what we expected. It took a couple of changes in coaches to get the right setup there. But we had to at some stage bite the bullet and say, listen, this ain't working. Stop, reset, totally, strip it right back. Let's start again and let's see what we can do. So we're now hopefully starting to reap the benefits of that pain that was there for a number of years.
Yeah. So as we get past 2023, which was, I think it's going to go down as the breakthrough year, where we got ourselves back into being recognised as contenders. What is left? What's missing to go to the next step?
I said the word before. In the first couple of weeks next year, it's trust that this is the real deal. And I think that we saw at the end of the year the way they performed. And listen, they were just out of petrol tickets in the finish. They were banged up and out of petrol. Went to Brisbane, gave it a bloody good go. But that's now history. I just want to see I want to see what they can do in the first 6 weeks. Get me to trust you unequivocally, and I think they can do it. I think that winning is something fantastic that builds confidence, and being able to go out each week and knowing, well, listen, we can do this, mob. There's no doubt about that. So I think the first 6 weeks, no matter what the draw is, I think the first 6 weeks are vital. I think that the team is pretty much in place. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jackson Binns can do, because obviously they held him back for a reason, and he's like the Carlton, the starting blocks. He just wants to get out and go, I think. So that'll be an interesting one. I also think that Elijah Hollands will be interesting. The guy has all the credentials now, if he can live up to it, and he really has to make his mark on the group very early on, and to prove himself. And that could be a really interesting addition as well. And also to Jack Carroll. I'm just wondering what Jack Carroll is going to be able to do now that he can cement his place a bit more in the VFL now that Paddy Dow's gone. It's probably give him more time in the centre. And he's an untapped talent. If you talk to people about his ability, they rave about it. His ability prior to coming. He was underage, obviously, and all those sorts of things. So it's his time to shine as well. So I think there's some good signs.
It's a curious time right now, because this is the first time I can remember with this group, especially, where you mentioned Binns, you mentioned Carroll. We haven't had to put them straight into the league from when they were drafted. We've had the ability to really refine their craft and almost, Binns, for example, he probably could have played at any point in 23, given his form in the VFL. And all of a sudden you build up this development, you build up this desire, and then 24, you've got a brand new recruit who can play, and he can.
Absolutely. And I go back to, when ancient history again, but you go back to the times when things were really tight. They got a number 1 draft pick, a ruckman, who was raw and whatever, and they chucked him in to the first ruck, almost the first game in Matty Cruiser. And I think that was the worst thing for his development ever. It was just, he was thrown to the wolves. He came in as a number 1 draft pick, and okay, they're gonna line you up if you're the number 1 draft pick that plays on the halfback flank or on the wing. But when you're the number 1 draft pick in the ruck, you're easy meat. And I just don't think that was any good for. But we had to do it because there was no one else there, because we had to hang our hat on something. We've got the number 1 draft pick. Hey, listen, it's a bit like what they did with what Melbourne did with Jack. Forgotten his name. The number 1 draft pick that they had there a number of years ago, and they threw him in as a bit of a promotional tool. Well, Matty Cruiser was a bit of a promotional tool while we were in the doldrums. And a couple of the other early draft picks, even Paddy Dow, I think that, if he could have had a good run in the twos and built up to it, it could have been a slightly different story. So our ability these days to take guys in and to say, no, listen, Cowan is another one, Lockie Cowan, okay, had a taste, put him back, let him develop. We'll call on you when we need you, because Newman's getting older, so-and-so's getting older. These guys here, be patient, because you're going to be part of a great team, but and it will evolve. Stick with us, and we'll give you a chance to develop so that you're coming in for the best part of your career.
Yeah, it's a good time. It certainly is a good time to be a supporter. It's been a much more enjoyable experience over the last couple of years. Before I let you go, I need to ask you, based on what you've seen, when do the group lift up the cup? Which year will it be?
The sweet spot is in the next 4 years. Yep. I would think that I would be disappointed if there wasn't a preliminary final appearance. If that happens, anything can happen. Would have been interesting if we'd got through to the prelim this year. And because I think if we'd been fully fit, the role we were on, there were a couple of worried teams that, gee, we don't want that mob to get through, especially with the sort of support they've had against Melbourne and against the Swans. If it's not 24, it's got to be 25. I think
Okay.
there's an expectation that time is right. Gee, if we reckon the list is right, if we reckon they're performing well together, that if it's not next year, should be 25. So expectation is there for sure. Gee, we've got to break away from that pack of 16, don't we? Got to get number 17 up there.
Got to get back in front.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, Paul, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, and I really enjoy hearing the stories from when I wasn't alive, because it really, like I said to you earlier, you can always learn something from the history. That's why it's there, and I really appreciate you documenting that for us today.
No, listen, absolute my pleasure. And Terry, obviously everyone would be saying the same thing, but keep up the good work, because it's a whole brand new frontier that you guys are going into, and you're doing it very, very well. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be a Carlton supporter when things are going well. People are saying nice things, and there's plenty of content around to swim in and drink the Kool-Aid, mate.
Absolutely. Go Blues.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.